Hey there, it's time for Monday is Funday at Wood Library. Hiya, I'm Mrs. Ferris and I'm here to share a couple of stories today, and we're going to do a fun craft. And before we get started, I have a question. You've probably been wearing something like this lately, haven't you? A mask to keep you safe and other people safe too. But can you think of an animal that wears a mask all the time and always has? Did you guess? A raccoon? You're right, raccoons wear masks. And we're going to have stories about raccoons. The first one is called Raccoon's Last Race. It's by Joseph and James Bruchac, father and son. And the pictures are by Jose Arguello and Arian Dewey, and it's published by Dial Books. Now, long ago, Raccoon did not look the way he does today. Back then, Asban the raccoon had very long legs, and he was a fast runner. In fact, he was the fastest of all the animals. And because of this, he liked nothing better than to challenge the other animals to a race. And with his long legs, he always won. He would race Bear. Zip, zip. He would beat Bear. He would race Fox. Zip, zip. He would beat Fox. He would race Rabbit. Zip, zip. He would beat Rabbit. Asban the raccoon also liked to taunt the other animals. That meant he liked to tease them, and not in a nice way. While racing, he would turn his head back to look at his competitor, and he would say, "Hee hee hee, look at me. I am Asban. I am fast. Look at you. Ho, ho, ho. You are very, very slow." Now, as you might imagine, this didn't please the other animals, and after a while, none would accept his challenge. In fact, they even refused to speak to Asban because he was always trying to taunt them into racing again. But this didn't stop him. He began to play tricks on the other animals. He would hide up in a tree, and when the animals walked by, he would jump down and frighten them. And because Asban was so fast, no one could ever catch him. Now one day, Asban noticed someone sitting up on top of a tall hill. "Perhaps I can play a trick on that one. Perhaps I can challenge him to a race," Asban said, and he quickly ran to the top of the hill. But when he got there, he discovered it was not an animal at all. It was a big rock, but this did not stop Asban. He loved to talk, especially about himself. "Grandfather, are you a fast runner?" he asked. "I am Asban, and I'm the fastest of all the animals." Well, to Asban's surprise, the big rock spoke back, and in a deep voice it said, "No, grandson, I do not travel. I just sit here." "Oh, you should try it, grandfather," Asban said. "Grandson," the big rock said, "I do not want to travel. I have been here for a long, long time, and this is how it will always be." Asban smiled. "Maybe not, grandfather. I will help you." Well, then Asban got behind Big Rock and he began to push and push. And as he did so, the rock began to wobble back and forth. Thump, bump, thump, bump. And Asban pushed harder and harder. Kaboom! The rock fell over on its side and began to roll. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. It rolled on down the hill. "Aha, grandfather!" Asban shouted. "Now you are traveling." Well, as Big Rock rolled down the hill, Asban quickly caught up and ran alongside. "How do you like it?" he asked. And the Big Rock answered, "Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom." Well, as that rock rolled down the hill, it naturally began to pick up speed. "Oh, yippee!" thought Asban. "This rock is trying to challenge me to a race. I will show it a thing or two." And running as fast as he could, Asban the raccoon flew past the rock that was rolling kaboom, kaboom down the hill. And it began to zigzag in front of the big rock while turning around and taunting. "Ha ha! You are very slow, grandfather. I, Asban, am very fast." But Asban turned his head to taunt the rock one time too many. And not looking where he was going, he tripped and ka-thunk! He fell on the ground right in front of that big rock. And since the rock had never been traveling before, it didn't know how to stop. So instead it went kaboom, kaboom, splat, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. On and on the rock traveled, enjoying itself quite a bit. And there lay Asban the raccoon, rolled so flat and wide by the rock that he could not move his arms or legs or even his head. All he could move were his lips. "Help me! Somebody, please help me!" he said in a small, flattened out voice. And no one seemed to hear Asban's cry for help. Or maybe, remembering all the tricks he had played, they did hear, but pretended not to notice. Bears skipped by, but didn't stop to help. Fox trotted by, but didn't stop to help. Rabbit, kabunk, kabunk, hopped right over him, appeared not even to notice, didn't stop to help. One by one, just about every animal in the forest passed Asban by. And Asban began to think he would be lying there forever. And then, toward the end of the day, one of the smallest creatures walked by, one of the ants. And walking right on top of him, he looked down on Asban's flattened out face and asked, "How can I help you? Everyone says that we ants are good for nothing." Well, Asban had hoped for someone a little bigger than an ant, but he looked up and he said, "Oh, no, I think you ants are wonderful. Please, go get all of your sisters, brothers, and cousins and help pull me back into shape. If you do, I promise that I'll always be your friend." Now, it's not easy being an ant. Other creatures are always kicking you around, not even noticing you. But with a friend as big as Asban, the ant thought, maybe everyone will show us a little more respect. "I will help," said the ant, "but remember your promise." "Oh, yes, yes, of course," said Asban. "Now hurry up and get back here with the others." So the ant went back to his village. "Hear me," he said. "Asban the Great has promised he will always be our friend if we help him pull back into shape." So the ants agreed that it would be good to have a friend as big as Asban. And before long, all of the ants, thousands of them, gathered around the raccoon and began to do something they do very well: work together. Those ants pulled and pushed and pulled and pushed, and they began putting Asban back into shape. Soon Asban the raccoon could move. He stood up, and as he did so, he saw that many of the ants were still clinging to his body. And instead of being grateful for what they had done, he just brushed them off and said, "Oh, horrible little ants." And he began to walk away without even saying thank you. However, after only a few steps, he noticed something. His legs were very short, and his body was still quite wide. He had brushed those ants before they had finished stretching him out. But having broken his promise, he knew that the ants would never agree to finish the job. Instead, Raccoon had to learn to accept being short and squatty, as he is today. And he is certainly not a fast runner. And that's the story of Raccoon's last race. Well, I'm going to get us ready for our craft, so I'll see you back here in just a minute. Okay, I think we're ready to do our craft. We're going to make a Raccoon Puppet today using some craft sticks. In fact, I'll show you all of the things that we need for it. You're going to need 3 or 4 craft sticks. One would be for the stick to hold him if you want. You're going to need some paint and a paintbrush, and something to put your paint in. If you don't have any paint at home, you can use markers, or you could just leave the craft sticks the color that they are. You're going to need some glue. You could use a regular paper glue. You could use a tacky craft glue. I'm actually going to use some glue dots. I don't know if you're familiar with these. Glue dots are something you can get at a craft store or at Walmart. And they're sheets that have little pieces of, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little circle of glue that's on this piece of paper, and you can pull it off and stick things together with it. And I'll show you when we get to that point. You're going to need some scrap paper, a light color, either white or a cream, and some black. You'll need a pencil, a pair of scissors, and some Google eyes. And I think that's it. I also have a glass of water here so I can wash off my paintbrush, and a piece of paper towel to clean it. And I have covered my surface. I have a placemat that I use for a lot of my painting projects here at the library. But if you don't have something like this, put down some newspaper just so you don't get paint on whatever it is that you're using for a flat surface. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take 3 of your craft sticks and put them together to make a triangle. I started doing this. They're going to be just like that you're going to want them. And you can either glue them together, or, as I said, I'm going to use the glue dots. If you glue them, you're going to want to wait until the glue dries to do the next step. So that's one of the reasons also I'm using glue dots. I'm going to put one on here, and when you use a glue dot, you just put what you want to have the glue dot go on, press it onto it, pull it off, and I don't know if you can see that, but it's right on the end of my craft stick. So I'm going to do this to it. And then I need to get one more glue dot. Put it on. And then put those together. And the glue dots are pretty forgiving so that you can wiggle them around until you get it in a triangle. But you can see how they form a nice triangle, just like that. Then you're going to want to take your light piece of paper and trace around your triangle. This is for the face of your raccoon. And when you cut it out, you're going to want to cut inside a little bit of that because you're going to put that on the back of your triangle. So I'm going to save that and cut it out a little bit later. So now that we have our triangle, we're going to want to paint it. And I usually put my paint in something like this is a lid off of a pretzel container. Just going to put a little bit of paint in here. Don't have to do much because I've already started doing this painting a little bit ago just to have a head start on us. As you can see. And then I'm just going to paint my craft sticks. You only need to paint one side. That looks pretty good to me. And then I'm just going to, first of all, stick my finger into my water and rinse it off because I don't want to get it on anything else. And then I'm going to take my paintbrush and just dip it in there in the glass of water and move that out of the way. But I always like to clean my brushes right after I use them so that the paint doesn't dry on them. So then I can also move the paint away, and I'm going to let that dry so I can cut out my triangle. Can you see it on there? And as I said, I'm going to cut a little inside of the line that I traced. So there's my triangle. And then we're going to need, well, what else do you think we need for our raccoon? We're going to need some ears, his mask, and his nose. So that's for the black paper. And what I'm going to have you do is draw something that looks a little bit like a gumdrop. It's maybe about 2 inches tall. It's basically a triangle, but with slightly rounded sides. And you can either draw it right on your black paper, or you can make a pattern like I did and trace it on there. And then this is a trick that I always like to use when I'm doing something where I have to cut 2 of something out. I need 2 pieces for the mask. So I'm going to take my paper, trim it off a little bit, and fold it in half so that when I cut it out, I'm actually cutting 2 pieces at once, and they'll be exactly the same size. So let's do that. Now when you make the mask, you want to be sure that the pieces are going to be big enough that when you put them down, they will actually touch, because you want it to look like a mask. So mine will do that. Okay. So I've got his mask. I need to get his ears. And for the ears, I really did just kind of a circle, and I do this one a little bit darker so you can see it. But once again, you're going to do it so that you can cut out 2 at once. So let me just cut my pattern off. And then I'll draw it on there. That. And once again, I'm going to fold my paper in half. I think I can do it this way and still get it. So that when I cut it out, I'll have 2 ears. It's interesting, the pattern that I saw for this craft project had the raccoon's ears being very pointy, almost like a fox's ears. But when I looked at all of my books, raccoons had more rounded ears, so that's why I've made these kind of rounded. And then we need his nose. Now, this should be just about dry. That's the one thing about craft sticks. If you don't glob on the paint too much, it dries pretty quickly. So I'm going to use the craft sticks for the pattern for the nose. I'm just going to set them down. I think I'll turn it over so you can see it a little bit better. And I'm just going to trace around one of the sides where we've got 2 pieces together. And then just draw a line across. And then when I cut it out, it should fit that raccoon, not fox, perfectly. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it. If you're using the regular glues, you may have to clip them, your triangle together till it dries, and that takes a little bit longer than obviously the glue dots. So you might want to use a clothespin on each corner until you're sure it's all done. And you really don't want to do any of the assembly until your glue is all dry. So now we're ready to put our raccoon together. We've got his mask, his ears, his nose, and his face. So I'm going to turn it over onto the back side, and then I'm going to put down some glue. You don't have to have a lot, it's just enough to make it stick. And then you'll I'll just set that right on there. And you can see that by cutting it just a little smaller than the area I traced, there's a little bit of an edge. So that makes it fit in there perfectly, and when you turn it over, you don't see any of that piece of paper. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit and then start assembling. There's his nose, so I'll just stick that down here. And his mask. It's going to go like that. So put a little glue there. So I'm putting some on the wood frame and some on the more pointed end. And then his ears, we'll turn it over for that. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn my mat here over on the other side because I think he'll show up better on the white. So there he is so far. And he just needs one, possibly two more things. What does he need? Well, he needs some eyes. So I have some wiggle eyes here. You can use any size. I bought a package that had all different sizes in there, so I could go big, I could go teeny tiny, whatever you like. You can even have two different sizes, I suppose. And again, I like to use the glue dots to stick those on, but you can use your craft glues. So I'll just take one, stick them right on there. And then just pull it off and stick it right on. And there's your raccoon. And if you wanted to, you could add one more stick down at the bottom to have it be a puppet. So that's our raccoon craft. Stay tuned because we've got one more story. Well, I think we still have time for one more story. This is called The Royal Raccoon. It's by Cathy Bellows. She wrote and illustrated it, and it's by Macmillan Publishing Company. And I'm going to move this in just a little bit so that you can see the pictures better. Fred was no ordinary raccoon. Fred was rich. Oh, he was filthy rich. He lived in a dump filled with garbage, and all the trash and all the rubbish and all the junk belonged to him. Everything was his. He had a magnificent palace made out of old cardboard boxes and a cozy bed filled with crinkly newspapers. There was a big bathtub to swim in and rubber duckies to play with. And every day, rain or shine, a dump truck arrived with all kinds of tasty treats to eat. Pizza crust, wallpaper, potato chips. Oh, Fred had it all. What a kingdom, thought Fred as he gazed across the junkyard. I must be the richest, the noblest, the best-dressed raccoon in the whole world. And that is why he decided to call himself Prince Frederick Bottlecap Macaroni III. It was the longest, grandest, not to mention tastiest name he could think of. But one morning, Prince Frederick awoke to the sound of barking. "Who goes there?" he yelled, standing atop his palace. "Who dares enter my kingdom?" Well, not far away, among the mattress springs and old tires, stood two very ferocious dogs. "How dare you come here?" he shouted. "Off with you! Out of my dump!" But the dogs liked the dump so much they decided to stay. So they barked and howled and chased the poor raccoon out of his palace, past his tub, through the tires, and into the wild swamp beyond. "Ruffians!" cried Raccoon as he climbed up a tree and hid in the high branches. "We're taking over this dump," barked the dogs, "so stay out, Raccoon, and don't come back." And then, laughing and howling, they marched into their new kingdom. "I'm ruined," cried Prince Frederick, wringing his paws. "Oh, my palace, my tub, my whole kingdom is gone, and worst of all, I miss my rubber duckies." Well, the poor raccoon was so miserable he began to weep. "Oh, what's to become of me?" he wailed. "I'm all alone in this wild place. I'm stuck in a swamp." But he wasn't exactly alone, for in the branches he noticed 3 wild and scruffy raccoons who were grinning at him. "Don't worry about a thing," said the first raccoon. "You can come and live with us in the swamp. My name's Daisy, this is Woody, and this is Fern. Why, in no time at all, you'll be just as wild and scruffy as we are." "Me? Wild? Oh, I've never heard of such an awful idea. Prince Frederick Bottle-Cap Macaroni III could never be wild." "I'm royal," he said. "I'm used to a kingdom of my own." But Prince Frederick was beginning to get hungry, so he decided to see what those wild raccoons could do. "Very well," he declared. "You scruffy ones may bring me my lunch. Pizza crust, potato chips, wallpaper. I'm not fussy. Anything the garbage truck brings will do." "Well, there's no garbage truck here," cried Fern. "But follow us, Freddie. We'll find you something good to eat." And into the swamp they disappeared. Well, never had Prince Frederick walked so far just to get some lunch. He climbed through the bushes and ducked under branches. He got scratched by all kinds of nasty twigs till finally the wild raccoon came upon an anthill. "How about some juicy bugs?" they said. "Are you kidding?" said the prince. "Royalty doesn't eat bugs." So they searched a little farther till they found some yummy roots. "Roots are always good for the teeth," they said. But the prince shook his head. "Roots? Never." On and on they went until they came to a forest of, ferns. "Here's something you'll like," they cried. "Fiddlehead ferns. Oh, they're our favorites." Well, Prince Frederick took a sniff, and then he took a nibble, and then he spit it up. "Oh, horrors!" he cried. "These are weeds." Well, by now he was beginning to feel rather dusty, so he decided to give him some more orders to the other raccoons. "Show me to my bath," he demanded. "I want to take a dip." "Sure thing, Freddie," said the wild raccoons. And skipping and scampering, they took the little prince deeper and deeper into the swamp until they came to a large pond. What a lovely pond it was. Bright water lilies covered the water, and pretty birds stood squawking along the edge. Daisy, Woody, and Fern dove right in. "This is a very strange bathtub," thought the prince. And when he dipped his toe in the water, he let out a scream. "Oh, this water's cold! And what's more, there's mud at the bottom of this tub. Oh, how dare you bring me to a mud hole? I demand to see my palace. This has been a very bad day, and your prince needs a nap." Well, the wild raccoons took Freddie even deeper into the swamp until they came to a tall pine tree. "This is where we sleep," they said proudly, pointing to their tree. "And because you're new, well, we'll let you have the softest, thickest branch in the whole tree." "Branch? You expect the prince of the dump to sleep on a branch? With no newspapers? No pillows? No little blankie?" But the little prince was so tired and so upset with all that had happened that he climbed up to the tall tree and he stretched out on the thick branch. Maybe this is just a bad dream, he thought. Maybe I'll close my eyes and when I open them, I'll be back in my dump. So he squeezed his eyes shut. Now when Freddie opened his eyes, there on the branch above him were 7 little possums. They were hanging upside down by their tails. "Hello, Mr. Raccoon," they squeaked. "We're your neighbors. Isn't it wonderful? We live in the branch just above yours." "Oh, that does it," said the raccoon. "I've had it. Being wild is not for me. I'm leaving." And down the tree he climbed. "Where are you going?" asked the wild raccoons. "Home," said the prince. "I'm going back to my dump, and if I can't go there, well, I'll find another dump. And if I can't find another dump, I'll live in a garbage can. But I'm not staying in this wild swamp. It's no place for a prince like me." And into the swamp he stomped. "Oh, you mustn't," called the wild raccoons. "Please, Freddie, it's dangerous out there." But when they tried to stop him, the little prince just shooed them away. Now in the thick forest they marched. Through it, stumbling and grumbling and waving his arms all about. He trudged through ferns and tramped over bushes till finally he came to a great marsh of tall reeds, and there in the warm mud lay a big old alligator, fast asleep. At least the prince thought he was asleep. But when he tried to tiptoe by, the gator opened one eye and said, "Where you off to, little raccoon? Don't you know it's dangerous in the marsh? Why, you never know who might be lurking in the reeds." "I happen to be looking for a dump," said the prince. "You see, I'm a prince and I must have a new kingdom." "Oh, I knew it," said the gator, opening both eyes. "I knew the minute I saw you that you were royalty." And then he bowed his head and said, "Your Royal Highness, let me introduce myself. I am Duke Lachamp, at your service." "Duke?" said the prince, and he took a closer look at the big green gator. "Well, if you're a duke, perhaps you could direct me to the nearest dump. I simply must get out of this mucky old swamp." "A prince in a swamp? Oh, why, the very idea," said the gator. "Please, your majesty, I know a wonderful dump, perfect for a royal raccoon like yourself. Please, I beg you, climb on my back and let me take you there." So the little raccoon sat down on the big gator's back, and through the muddy waters they swam. Farther and farther into the swamp they went. And wider and toothier was that gator's grin. "Oh, what a lucky gator I am," he thought, and his huge mouth began to water. Finally, they came to the deepest, darkest part of the swamp, to the place where nobody but alligators dared to go because it was so deeply creepy and scary. And there, in the midst of a thick black bog filled with rotten old cypress trees, the great gator stopped. "Why are we stopping here, Duke?" asked the prince. "This doesn't look like a very nice dump to me." "This is no dump," said the gator as he headed toward the biggest, oldest, most rotten tree of all. "This is my home." And inside the hollow tree trunk he slithered. Now the little raccoon was beginning to get awfully nervous, especially when the Duke set him on a plate and sprinkled salt on his head. "You know," said Fred, "I don't believe you're a Duke at all. I think you're just a plain, ordinary reptile." "Well, I don't think you're a prince at all," said the gator. "I think you're just a plain, ordinary supper." And then he grabbed Fred by the tail and opened his jaws wide. "Help!" cried the poor raccoon as he dangled above those spiky alligator teeth. "Oh, please, someone help me." I don't know if you can see that. Look who's coming. Well, just as the gator was about to chomp, through the door came the wild raccoons. "Let go of our Freddy," they cried, grabbing the gator by the tail. "Let go of my tail," growled the gator. "Let go of my tail," screamed Freddy. And with all that pushing and pulling and hooting and hollering, the big old tree began to shake and tremble, and it swayed this way and that, weeping and creaking until finally it cracked, and into the water it crashed, where it sank plunk right down to the bottom of the thick black bog. "My house!" cried the gator as they tumbled into the water. "You ruined my beautiful rotten house." But by the time he surfaced and looked around, all the raccoons were gone. Across the bog, the raccoons scurried. Faster and faster they ran through the reeds, under the trees, and all around the bushes and ferns. And through it all, no one ran faster. No one jumped higher. No one leaped farther than Prince Frederick. He ran and he ran, and he didn't stop until he reached the old pine tree. "Oh, what a place this wild swamp is," he cried as the sun began to rise. "What a terrible, wonderful place. That alligator was so terrible, and you raccoons were so wonderful. Oh, please, Daisy, please. Woody, let me stay here with you. Oh, please, Fern, say that I can stay." Well, the raccoons could hardly believe their ears. "Don't you want to go back to your dump kingdom?" asked Daisy. "Back to your pizza crusts and rubber duckies and bed of crinkly newspapers?" "Certainly not," said Freddie. "What kind of place is that for a raccoon? No, I want to be where my friends are. I want to be brave and loyal and scruffy, just like you." So Prince Frederick Bottlecap Macaroni III changed his name to Fred Fiddlehead, and he stayed in the swamp where he lived happily ever after. So those are our two stories. We had one about why a raccoon can't run very fast anymore, and also one about a raccoon that had to run as fast as he could. Thanks for coming to our Monday's Funday, and well, we hope we'll see you again next time.